ahead and move on right now. We have Pooja coming in from Autodesk. Pooja, I invite you to share your screen and start talking to us. I know we're talking a lot about emotions, so I will kick it off to you.
Thank you so much. And that was a juicy conversation and possibly a tough act to follow. But here we are. Hi, everyone. I am Pooja. Really glad to be here. I lead a team of product writers, or what we call content designers at Autodesk. I've spent nearly half my life in tech, and specifically the last decade working in leadership roles or staying adjacent to people leadership roles, moving from engineering to product management and currently content within design. Now, when you work with a group of people who are making a living writing, you are probably working with a group of humans who are pretty adept at critiquing and communicating their feelings. So, as a leader, I have certainly felt challenged in how I view and navigate these conversations and situations with my team. And I've also talked to a lot of leaders and fellow peers who view feelings or emotions as a taboo topic at work, because there are very few objective ways in which we can ground our judgment or ground our reaction to these emotions. But today, I want to invite you all into this conversation to explore how leaning into emotions can be appropriate in a workplace and even healthy for the mental well-being of your teams. So with that, I want to start by saying that as a manager, your teammates are guaranteed to have surprising reactions to things that happen in your work environment. So as a manager, we ought to be prepared to navigate it, to understand it, and to best support our teammates. So today we'll walk through how to recognize triggers and unearth what might be behind those emotions. And we'll also look at 6 core human needs in the workplace and how to recover from triggered situations when your teammates are feeling some resistance or doubt. Now, during a crisis, trauma shows up in a few ways, and feel free to use the chat to, add in your thoughts on how you have seen trauma or just disconnect show up at work for you. Few things to me that really stand out and that can be bucketed thematically are distraction, low energy, people excusing themselves from meetings, or even tears. So as a leader, you just have to expect it and think about how you're going to deal when it happens. And I also want to share that unpleasant feelings, right, are so much a part of the human experience. No emotion is inherently bad or inherently inappropriate. For example, anxiety can help you face a potential threat. Anger can help you stand up for yourself. And sadness can signal to other people that you need their social support. So when you experience a bad feeling as a manager, or when you're supporting someone on your team who's going through that journey, you don't have to love the feeling. You can just try to feel neutral about it. And there's been a new study where they highlighted that people who reacted neutrally were just as psychologically healthy as those who reacted a little more positively or a little more empathetically. So it's important to note that accepting emotions is different from accepting the situations that cause those bad emotions. So I want to walk you all through this framework, which I discovered from a very popular leader, Paloma Medina. And I discovered this organically from a book called Resilient Management by Lara Hogan. And you don't need to take notes. You'll see all these resources at the end of this deck. But BICEPS is the name of the framework. And yes, you're right. It is another acronym that we are borrowing from the fitness industry taking the lead from Lauren here in terms of, sweating my management style, I guess. But generally, when someone appears triggered or angry or some other strong emotion that's surprising, it's likely that their core needs are feeling threatened. This is also when the fight or flight response kicks in. Now, we're all familiar with Maslow's hierarchy of core needs, and this is a similar framework but adapted for the workplace. So the acronym expands as follows. And I need to see where I've lost. So learning about people's core needs in my leadership experience has critically shifted my management style and approach, as I now better understand why someone is reacting in such a surprising way to a situation that I don't perceive as threatening. And I sometimes joke that in the course of my career as a manager, I have seen the biggest displays of human emotion, not around hiring or firing or org restructuring, but around, guess what? Calendar invites. Now, you might be wondering that receiving calendar invites is just logistics, right? But one of the most common frustrations that I've heard from teammates and even leaders sometimes is that they are not invited to meetings. Or worse, they see meetings that get rescheduled with no justification whatsoever. Now, when you look back at this framework, you might then question yourself, let's start with belonging. How might your belonging core need feel threatened? So let's take a deeper look at belongingness as a core need. Now, this is a core need that is anchored on three principles, right? Community, connection, and well-being. Community, as we can say, closeness with a group, that tight-knit feeling with a community. Well-being, on the other hand, is like enjoying this feeling of being cared for, and enjoying the perks of having a happy, healthy relationship with your peers. And connection, of course, is that mutual understanding with another person. So going back to that example of calendar invites, right? Someone's attendance might be their representation of how they belong to a group. So by not being invited to a meeting, they are worried about feeling distant or absent or left behind. Maybe they're not in the room where important decisions are being made. And so they fear that they won't understand the company's decisions or have important context, or they won't be able to relate to the group in the same way. So if you're a manager, I would encourage that you acknowledge the missed opportunity and that you're eager to help them address this shift in belonging. Perhaps you can partner with them to develop other ways to retain that core need. Maybe you can consider ways to make them feel included. Maybe you can check in with, the people who are hosts for that meeting to see what really is the agenda and what is the value exchange that is happening and how your teammate can be a part of it. And you can also help them see how their relationship with others can improve to help them initiate relationships and get invited into those quote unquote rooms. Next, we look at improvement. Now, improvement, as the name suggests, is anchored on growth, your own growth, as well as how you grow those around you. Now, being excluded from meetings can disrupt that feeling of moving forward and can feel almost like an unnecessary curveball that is jeopardizing your progress on a project or a team. So if you're a manager, you can help your teammate see that bigger picture, right? Describe the goal from a leadership standpoint. And then what are certain things that you're working on in order to achieve within the settings of this meeting? Acknowledge that it may not feel relevant to your direct report's primary objectives, if so be the case, but there is a broader strategy in place that may not feel on a day-to-day basis. And this change is helpful for the larger organization. So what you're really doing is providing a perspective and offering a reframe on that missed opportunity. It may also be helpful to highlight ways in which productively asking questions can help them grow as a leader or a role model for that teammate. For example, navigating team dynamics can sometimes be super hard for our folks, and it's a mix of a person's demeanor and attitude that really makes a huge difference and an impact in terms of which rooms they have access to and how they navigate such changes effectively, and also help others do the same. So there are some tactical pieces here, but bringing that perspective and giving your teammate a lens to look at the same problem from a different angle might perhaps open their eyes to something that they have not seen before. Choice. Now, when it comes to choice, it's all about having control over key parts of your world, having autonomy, and having that ability to make decision for yourself. Now, sometimes certain meetings have exclusive invites, and they are often a representation of a larger shift within a company's culture or scale or priorities. So they might see it as an overwhelming representation of more loss of control to come, right? So if you're a manager, you can help your teammates see where they have flexibility, where they enjoy autonomy and choice in their work. And also maybe, use this opportunity to acknowledge that this is an intentional shift, while reminding them of the broader picture at play. And sometimes, with growth opportunities within companies, or a company that's on a steep scaling journey, changes will continue to happen. And change is our only constant, right? So you want to be reminding that. And you want to be reminding your folks about what it means to be working here in a setting like this, and where are there opportunities to adjust as the company changes. So these are all small moments that you can use to coach, to figure out how to find other avenues for autonomy and choice. But I think knowing that these are the core needs that are being threatened gives you the vocabulary and the lens to reframe that problem into an opportunity for your teammate. Equality or fairness. Now this one's very close to my heart. And equality or fairness is a core need. It's a key core need for all of us as just humans, right? Now, there is a difference between equality and equity, and I want to take a moment to just ground that. Equality aims to treat people the same way, providing the same resources, same opportunities, and support to everyone, regardless of their individual needs or circumstances. It assumes that everyone starts from the same point and can achieve success with equal treatment. Now, equity, on the other hand, recognizes that individuals have different needs, different challenges, and different circumstances. So it involves distributing resources in a way that's fair and just, addressing individual differences. So while equality focuses on sameness, equity focuses on fairness and addressing these disparities. And I think knowing these is valuable, because sometimes both of these are used interchangeably. So coming back to our calendar invites example, selective invites to meetings can feel unfair. Some people and groups are treated better than others. For example, you might not have access to that VP conversation, or you might not have that direct access to intel or an opportunity to travel on site. So some groups may feel like they had more input or more choice in the decision to participate, while others did not. And like it or not, who gets to join a party can absolutely reinforce whether you're the company's cool kid or not. So as a manager, I think we have an opportunity here to inform our teams of the reasons behind a decision, to demonstrate that this wasn't arbitrary. And when possible, tie it back to company strategy and company objectives, right? You can reframe it as it's important for us to limit the participants to just the triads, for those who are familiar with the triad model, in order to expedite decision making. Or you could say something like, this will help us invite your inputs as a secondary in the secondary round. So you can always find ways to get those same outcomes, but with an adjusted style. And when you get that sense that someone might have their equality, fairness, core need threatened, I think what's really at the heart here is to get ahead of the communication plan, right? And either develop talking points for all managers to understand and share, or go directly and talk to those individuals slightly ahead of time, which might sometimes be technically unfair, but it could help them in the overall understanding. So as a manager, I would encourage, do not deny how someone feels. They're telling you about their core needs, and I think that deserves to be heard. But do clarify that it's complicated to make everyone feel valued. Like in this case, not everyone can sit in a high value spot or a meeting. And to also ask them how they think this might be improved in the future. Predictability. Predictability is all about having enough certainty about resources and when things will occur. So the predictability core need may be threatened by a surprising last minute meeting announcement, especially for those who are particularly analytical or data driven. So showing up and coming prepared to a conversation is often a representation for someone's core predictability need. When one even small thing in that routine shifts, it can really be challenging for this individual. So as a manager, it's helpful to spot who are those people who are sticklers for routine and rigor, and help them plan ahead and do everything you can to reduce the surprise of the change. The other thing you could also try out is give people a long lead time between the notification and the event. Even better, help them internalize that change is routine and it's healthy to become resilient to change, especially if you're working in high velocity environments or startup environments. And also, let's be real, right? As managers, it is not humanly possible for you to keep every single thing predictable. So don't shoulder this burden yourself. You can coach your direct report on how they can regain ownership or regain certainty of their situation. So, for example, if you're not sure when a change will happen, scenario plan with your report so they feel in control again. And you can ask questions like, what could you do to mitigate this mayhem? Or what would help to help you feel productive this week? Small, handy vocabulary tidbits there. And lastly, significance. Now, significance core need comes up so often in management work that I often try to address this one first with most people. So significance, or it's sometimes interchangeably used with status. It's all about understanding where you are in the hierarchy and some sort of routine recognition of that status. So one of the things you can do is ask each of your reports early on in your reporting relationship, or even maybe right now, if you haven't already, for recent examples of when they felt recognized. Was it a launch email where they were thanked? Was it a private handwritten note? For anyone who's doing that, you already have a fan in me. Or was it someone giving them relief in their schedule? Most folks cannot articulate what they prefer right off the bat. So one of the things that I do, again, borrowing from Lara's framework, is something that I call one-on-one cheesy questions. And I usually bake that in my first or second one-on-one, especially if I've inherited a new team or if I have joined a new team. And one specific question that I ask there is, do you prefer public or private recognition? And folks, that question it opens my eyes to everything this individual really enjoys. It tells me a lot about how introverted or extroverted they may be, or how much, how do they think about celebrations and team accomplishments. And it's often a good baseline. So as managers, we often guess people feel most recognized with two things, right? Money or a title change. But in my experience, those things are good band-aids for significance, but they don't cut to the core of this need. And some of it could be because some people enjoy being on the staff call with the VPs, and now that's changing with the reorg. Maybe they had a good rapport with an engineer, as an example, and now they don't, from not having been included in those meetings. Or maybe they liked attending the weekly jamming session because there was some other status signifier about their expertise and about their presence. So addressing this significance score need in the way that feels most valued is what's key for your teammate. And you can work with your partners to see how you can recalibrate or reset those expectations. Now, just like with the equality fairness value, I would also again say, do not deny how someone feels, right? They're telling you about their core needs, but you want to be clarifying how easy or complicated it is to make everyone have their status acknowledged within this change, and to really even ask them how this can be improved. So wrapping up this framework, I want to leave you all with some very handy vocabulary tidbits. These are some handy prompts I use, especially when I'm in that coaching mode with my direct reports, and trying to just unpack what's behind an emotion or a reaction, or even, some surprising behavioral change that I have noticed. It's always helpful to keep, just being present and being that listener and trying to tease apart what's going on behind their minds, and not superimposing your assumptions on them. So I would say this is a good starting point. And then a question I'd really love is to also ask, what's your gut feeling about these options? Or, what is your spidey sense telling you about these? And that's also a nice lightweight way to just get them to lean into this curiosity process and, get their thinking out. And this is another framework that I also enjoy using, especially in settings when you hear words like I'm frustrated or I'm upset about something. You want to be making room for that context, right? And here are some really helpful phrases that you can use to be objective as you can in getting the full picture before you derive your own conclusions. And you also want to be looking for the bright spots, right? So sometimes things may not have worked, and maybe you're seeing a silver lining, or maybe you can even ask that question, like, what do you think has worked here? And then lastly, I love this question is, sometimes we don't have answers. For the most part, we don't. As managers, we come to answers after a lot of digging. But I love asking, my teammates, if you were me, what would you do about this, right? And that's an interesting sort of repositioning. Sometimes it empowers them to be in that driver's seat and scenario play in their mind of possibilities. So this is again a great coaching opportunity. And then lastly, collaborating, right? It's a team effort. That's really how you want to be framing it. And it needs to come from a place of, genuine curiosity, where you're really working as a team to solve a problem and not trying to base it off of someone's personality or just personal circumstances. And another favorite question of mine here on the right, if you could improve this by even a little, and I like putting a percentage because my team is mostly analytical, is what would you do first? And that's again a great way to get some buy-in and compliance without us, superimposing our solutions on the team. Lastly, I will leave you all with these reading resources. I highly, highly recommend Laura Hogan's book if you haven't already. There is a ton of just useful nuggets. I see it as mandatory reading for any manager, new or seasoned. And there are references to Paloma Medina's work. If you actually have access to this deck, you can click on the links and do those additional reading. And finally, yeah, hit me up on LinkedIn, and I'm open to questions.
All right, perfect. Well, I know we have a lot of frameworks that you just introduced here. A lot of the questions were actually really scenario based, and actually really personal. So I just kind of, I want to read them, but maybe we just kind of talk about them in the framework perspective. I know there's not a one answer fits all here, especially when you're dealing with emotions and not the direct feedback. So, but there was a lot of thought-provoking situations. I know we were going through them earlier. So considering where a lot of people are right now, teams have experienced a lot of layoffs, unfortunately, maybe team restructuring, teams they haven't worked on before. How do you recommend, we'll just handle that directly. How do you recommend, navigating that doubt, navigating that uncertainty? Maybe, multiple team members are upset. How do you then kind of rebuild that trust with them?
It's such a great question. And I think I want to say most of us, and I don't want to speak for everyone, but we've all felt the tremors of that, if not firsthand, right? The two things that I think have really sort of helped me to some extent is one, asking open questions and offering reflections rather than issuing, directives. And that's hard, especially in a moment where there is just so much uncertainty. It's hard for leaders sometimes to make room for those conversations because they don't have answers, and that dissuades a lot of people from not knowing how to balance transparency with support for their reports. So I definitely think there is value in having those avenues for just asking questions and seeing where people have doubts, or just like I said, even in today's presentation, those feelings of resistance and fear and anxiety. Sometimes it's just they need someone to hear them and be there for them. And I think making space for those reflections is always meaningful. The second thing that I would highly recommend, and I think again this is in any manager rule book, right? When you know that there is cost cutting happening, you have to make sure that you're aligning your team priorities to the company objectives, and finding ways to ruthlessly do that, I think, are just two absolutely essential, approaches, I think, especially for teams who have suffered layoffs or restructuring recently.
Yeah, and I think that when that happens, you have people on your team that are taking on extra responsibilities, who are feeling more stressed and more burned out. And if you've been with us for years, we've talked about stress and burnout way before, these trends started happening when we were, just hiring willy-nilly. So I don't think it's going away. And so I think this talk is so important in order to address those emotions, give you guys a little bit of framework to go forward with. But it's always, it's always been there. So a lot of the questions we're seeing is around that sort of stress and uncertainty. I want to throw you this one as well, because a couple of people ask this in different ways here. But how do you navigate a team that might be more technically experienced than you? How do you support them going forward? And because that's a difficult relationship that you've built kind of naturally, right?
Yeah, I would say, well, technical competence, we all have a sense of, especially if you're a new leader in a new company. I did this because I joined, Autodesk a year ago. And as part of my first mile journey, or what is typically the first 90 days, you're trying to get a pulse check on how mature is this team when it comes to processes, when it comes to quality outputs, when it comes to technical know-how or knowledge. And then you're trying to get a full picture to understand what are certain pieces that I should now start calibrating or improving. So I think when you have a team, it sounds like your question, Haley, was more around when you do have a peer team, how do you leverage that expertise? Is that right?
Right.
I think that's great, right? That's a blessing in disguise. If you have a team of experts who are there, out there and running, you want to be forming relationships with them. That's really, my short answer. How you do that, that takes time, right? Especially if you're the new kid on the block, there's a bit of trust building that will need to happen. I think having that beginner's mindset and always, treating every day as day one really helps in being grounded, and also making a lot of time to approach questions, so that they come from a place of knowledge, not that you're just asking questions that are readily available in a wiki. You're doing your homework, and you're, leveraging everything you can, and then complementing that with, peers and leaders and customers, everyone who's giving you intel.
Well, I know a couple of those were popping up in the Q&A chat, so hopefully that answered for you. If not, feel free to keep chatting those questions. A lot of them were quite similar, so I'm glad we got to cover that. Pooja, thank you so much for joining us. I will give you your day back, but we really appreciated hearing from you.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you.